Welcome along, my aspiring allies, and thank you for joining me on this most recent episode of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. This is the podcast where we take some things that are often a bit complicated or complex and we break them down so that we can make sense of them and get over the fear of putting our foot in it when we have difficult conversations. Now, today I am joined by the incredible Priscilla Leigh. Now, Priscilla is a psycho-audiologist, and if you're thinking, what is that? Well, that is exactly the question I asked her because I had no idea either. And we have just had a fantastic conversation all about speech and hearing. So she talks all about the way that our hearing and the way that our ears work can affect our emotions and our mood. So it's this relationship between sound and energy and emotion. And honestly, it was fantastic. She is fantastic. Now, Priscilla is a Swiss-born, French-raised Ghanaian, and her career history is just as interesting as she is. And she talked me through all of her journey as how she arrived at being a psycho-audiologist, which I can assure you, if you Google that, you aren't going to get an answer. She needs to explain it to you. She has got many, many master's degrees. We found out she collects them like Pokemon cards, and for good reason, because she is a master at several different things and she has brought them together in this fantastic Venn diagram of expertise. So if this sounds like it is going to float your boat, oh, pun intended, then please do sit back, relax, and get yourself comfortable in whichever way works best for you. And join me as I talk to Priscilla Leigh on the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. Oh, oh.
Is it still a podcast if it hasn't been recorded?
Yeah,
It's like one of
exactly.
those,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like,
Did
did
the
it make a
tune
sound?
fall? Did we say anything of any use? Who knows? Right, let's try again. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah. I
Good. Good.
had I've been teaching kids public speaking this term, and this was
Right.
the last day today. So, uh, yeah, yesterday I was like baking cookies and putting their names on it and doing all these things, and my mom was like helping me put the sprinkles on it.
Oh
It's
my God, that's adorable.
Yeah, so it was a little show and tell, but the parents came in and stuff. So yeah, so that was just about an hour ago. So I was like, okay, into the podcast. Yeah.
Now, okay, wow, right, okay. Immediately, this feels like this is going to be one of those recordings that I'm actually going to have to do from the very start because this
Okay.
this is crazy interesting. So how old were these kids that you were teaching?
They were so between year 4 and year 6, so between 8 and 11.
Okay, good age.
Yeah.
For anyone listening
Well,
and not watching on YouTube channel, my face was pulled of one that is, I know my neighbours' kids when they were that age, and my God, they
yeah.
were interesting. With all their
Well, so,
opinions.
so it's interesting because it was the first time that I was doing such a young age group. And given that I'm part of Toastmasters, I basically was thinking we're going to do Toastmasters just for younger kids. And I started with that in mind for week 1, and then week 2 I was like, yeah, let's revisit that.
Yeah.
Essentially, with every week I got a little bit more realistic about what I could do in 1 hour with kids
Mm.
between the ages of 8 and 11. So I think we got there by week 5 where we were doing, you know, the charades where you're like, what's my body language and how is that conveying when, those kinds of things. And yeah, like thinking on your feet and speaking for 30 seconds and those kinds of things. So yeah, but yeah, so it was really, really interesting. And it so happened that it was in my own primary school. So yeah,
Oh.
lovely.
Okay, so that's like full circle adorable then, because you're getting to see something really cool and they get to see somebody who was once them.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I found it really special because I really loved my primary school. And and yeah, so each week I showed them a little picture of me when I was in the primary school. I was like, "Oh, here's another one." So yeah, I thought it was actually a really special thing to be able to do. Yeah.
That's so cool. And where was this primary school, if I might ask?
Geneva?
Right.
Yeah. So in Switzerland. Yeah. Lovely,
So
lovely.
was this something you did virtually? Or are you currently in Switzerland?
Oh, I'm currently in Switzerland.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Got back
I
to
thought,
this
I
year.
made an assumption. I thought, no, just check that, because I thought that would be interesting to do virtually. How the hell? And then the baking the little, what was it, cakes that you made?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Sent
would
them
have
by
been,
DHL, you know.
yeah. You just look what I made you.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. So that was it. Like it was the end of some weeks, which I loved, and also thought, for someone who lives in London, this is not a situation that can be sustained for very long. So
Right.
yeah,
But it was fun.
fun for sure.
Excellent. And I noticed you have a new book out as well. Young Leaders Guide to Public Speaking.
Indeed, yes.
So this
I
feels like that links in really well then to,
Yeah.
were they the young leaders you had in mind when you wrote the book?
They were slightly younger than the young leaders, but they definitely qualified with the young. So
Yeah, for sure.
um yeah, they the book it's interesting. The book came about because I was speaking to a friend in February or so, talking about my business, and my business is all to do with hearing and how it affects behavior. And but also I do leadership coaching. So
Mm.
I was telling this friend about it, and he said, well, you do all this stuff related to public speaking. So how about doing a course, like writing a course in public speaking, and at least putting that out there as content that people could
Mm.
use, benefit from? And so I just started writing, and it just flowed. And
Oh, they say that, don't they? That when you've got a book and you just let it flow.
yeah, and that was definitely my experience. And then at the end of it, I had the script, and then I thought, well, now if I want to make it into a course, I still have to film it, but why not just put it into a book?
Mm.
And, as opposed to do all the takes of
Yeah,
the course. And that's how the Young Leader's Guide to Public Speaking came about.
that's awesome. And so how take me back a bit to the beginning, because you mentioned there, didn't you, that obviously you do the, is it like the auditory? Because in my head, when I say auditory, in my mind I picture an auditorium, so I'm just like, which I guess
Oh,
obviously has its etymology and the same roots, right?
yeah.
But psycho-audiologist, I believe, is the correct term for you. Would that be right?
Yes, and actually, I will caveat that because I remember saying this to someone who said, I Googled this and I did not find the term. So just to be clear, because I studied psychology and audiology, I am probably the only psychoaudiologist you will
Got
find.
it.
I'm interested in how hearing affects the behavior, and I specifically termed it psychoaudiology because um, obviously psychology is about behavior and the mind, uh, but not specifically the auditory system. And audiology often has to do with the hearing system, or the function of the ears, but it really focuses a lot on hearing loss. And I'm really interested in the fact that most of us have hearing that's quote unquote within normal limits, but there are a lot of ways that the auditory system can be uh might be affecting our behavior, and we don't know it because we don't have hearing loss. And so we're like, well, my ears are
Right.
fine. So yeah, so I'm interested in that intersection of the auditory system and the mind and behavior.
Okay, so that's fascinating, because that was going to be one of my questions. I was like, okay, psychoaudiologist, what's that?
What
Because it sounds fancy, but now you've explained that, that makes complete sense. And I like the fact that you're also like, kind of curious in delving into it, going, okay, well, if we're talking about hearing, but if all of that is then focused on, like you said, hearing loss,
Mm.
what else is there? So I love that you've kind of explored that, and then you're putting your own spin on it to say, well, hang on, I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
psychology, I'm interested in this, the hearing part, I'm interested in leadership. So how, where's the Venn diagram of all of these things, which is my sweet
It's
spot?
a very small one, I can tell you.
Well, we talk about niching, don't we? Apparently we all need a niche.
Yeah.
You found it. So how did you arrive there? Because I can't imagine you woke up one day and you just went, oh yeah, these things.
Yeah. Yep. What a thing to study. Yeah.
You
Oh,
just picked names out of a hat, didn't you? You're going to just
yeah.
ruin the illusion. Go, yeah, no, I just wrote a bunch of stuff down.
Pick a profession. Yeah. Um, well, the journey to psycho-audiology, it's quite a windy one for sure. So I okay, I'm gonna go back to my bachelor's, and then so I studied natural sciences at UCL, and the plan with that, one of the streams in that was medical physics, which I liked because it was physics, but it was related to people. Like, it wasn't too abstract. So I thought, okay, medical physics is the thing
Okay,
I'm
what is that? Sorry. For those of us that didn't go to university, what's medical
Yeah, yeah,
physics?
no, absolutely. Medical physics is essentially, so I like to term it, a medical physicist would be a little bit like a consultant for a radiologist. So the radiologist is the one that does the imaging and
Okay.
that kind of thing. And a medical physicist is going to uh, essentially give advice to the radiologist about what it is they're trying to find. So with the physics that goes behind the imaging. So as an example, when you do a CT scan or you do an X-ray, there's a certain amount of radiation that you're getting. And the higher the dose of radiation, the more accurate you can potentially get that image. So the radiologist might want to know if you have a fracture, and they'll say, well, like, I want to see this. And I guess ideally you would just like irradiate the patient, and except not so ideally because you don't want to die. So
Yeah.
the
There's
so
a
the
balance I can
yeah,
see.
exactly. So the physicist is going to say, well, if you need this level of detail, then let's put this amount of radiation so that you can do your job and we can keep the patient, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah. Because of, I guess, the, first do no harm principle of medicine
yeah,
needs
yeah.
to be
This
adhered
is
to. You'd
what we're
rather be
trying
just
to
like, let's
uphold.
do it.
Yeah.
Let's see what happened.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what the medical physicist does in general. There are also things that they might do government-wise with levels of radiation for a population, that kind of thing. But and then a lot in radiotherapy when it comes to cancer, that kind of thing. So medical physics was my plan. And so I did my master's after that. So I moved to Oxford to do my master's, and it was in diagnostic imaging, so basically more of medical physics. Um, and then from there, I thought, okay, well, great. So now let's go ahead and be a medical physicist. So I applied to this program, which was a nationwide one, uh, uh, and I didn't end up getting in. And I
Because they're fools, right?
was that.
Because they're fools.
That's yeah, that's absolutely the only
Do you
reason
ring them up now and go,
I
look at
uh,
what you would have won?
but,
Sorry.
yeah, and so at the time I was in Geneva, and I thought, "Okay, well, should I stay in Geneva? What should I do?" And from there, I started volunteering in a school with, kids with learning difficulties, and I ended up working in that. And, I guess fast forward to basically working in that environment and with kids that had different needs, could be dyslexia, they could be on the autism spectrum, ADHD, lots of different things. And what I found again and again was that the methods we were using to help these kids were not working, you know? So if the kid has dyslexia and what I'm doing with you is spelling and reading exercises, when the thought of a book gives you anxiety, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for me, you know?
No one's gonna feel very much fun in that scenario, are
Exactly,
they? Yeah.
exactly. So likewise with the kid with ADHD who's really struggling to sit still and, you know, the methodology is like, oh, you know, try and focus. That's also not gonna work,
Mm.
you know? So that's where I found myself. But my boss at the time, um, I had actually been hired to work with this one kid who was on a, it was, I can't remember the name of the actual sound therapy he was doing, but it was a listening program, sound therapy listening program. And so I did this program with him, and this kid had all the, you know, dyslexia, dyscalculia, all, you know, every EA you could think
Yeah.
of. He had it. And also really when it came to his attitude, he death glares every time he saw me. He was like, I really hate you, you know? So uh that was him, but I was really interested in this program that he was doing. And he also really struggled with attention. And so I was doing this program with him. And I mean, long story short, at the end of this program, I really saw a difference in how much he was able to remember of what I asked him. If I gave him, you know, hey, do 1, 2, 3, and 4, how much of that would he recall or be able to answer? What just his memory, his but also his emotion. He was a generally pretty like a just quite an angry kid. And through the program, I just saw such a difference in his engagement and just not being so angry, just being able to control his emotions a little bit better and his balance and everything, lots of things. So that got me really interested in what was going on. And you know, of course, I really wanted to put it down to, well, you know, it's just because you're just a great educator, Priscilla. That's why.
I mean, it probably, but it's always worth having a look, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, the fact that none of my other kids made much progress in that in that
Yeah,
area.
you came in like Mary Poppins and it was all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly. Um, so that was the beginning of my journey with that, and my boss sent me to do different courses that had to do with things that were far more to do with the roots of things. So I did this course on reflexes, you know, reflexes like the ones that you have when you're a baby, like you put your index in the palm of a baby and you know, they'll grab it. And it, this course on reflexes that I did was just showing actually we don't pay attention to these in kids with learning difficulties, but they have underdeveloped reflexes, which is going to affect how they can concentrate, going to affect how much they can, how well and how quickly their reading develops, all that kind of stuff. And on this course that I did there, I discovered more about sound therapy, and I was just super fascinated, and it was just a breath of fresh air to look at something that wasn't palliative, that wasn't just, "Hey, here's the symptom and here's what we do about it," but went a little bit deeper into it. So that was the
You just
beginning.
say, I mean, that's what stood out when you were talking about there, when you started talking about the root cause of things.
Yeah.
And I often find that's something that we so overlook, just
Mhm.
generally in society. We're always too quick to go, oh, this thing, and we stay very surface because we don't want to get curious. We don't want to look for patterns and correlations or just do the work really to stop thinking, well, maybe that problem, that person isn't a problem. Maybe they're just
Mm.
really damn frustrated, or maybe there's
Mm.
something else going on. Like how do we
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, no, I mean, I think on that, just the fact that a lot of people no one gets up thinking, "Well, how can I be a really frustrating person?" You know,
Yeah.
like, But we've all
Yeah, I'm gonna
been
do the
that
worst
frustrating
job.
person.
Yeah,
You know?
I'm gonna be the worst person to everybody else that I can possibly be.
Yeah, exactly.
Tick.
Alienate people, you know. Um, yeah, it reminds me of the Dale Carnegie book, like How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. It was not the title of the book, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, so that's how I got into it. And yeah.
Awesome. I mean, that in itself is all of the colors are fascinating, right? Isn't it? And
Yeah.
I love how, I mean, you've clearly got an incredibly curious mind in that regard, where you kind of like see the thread and follow it and be like, oh, that's interesting. Let's go down that route. Why did that happen?
Mm.
Um, and I find it fascinating. So then that led you to kind of the sound therapy piece, and then really getting into like, so how did the dots connect for you there in terms of like, oh, ears are a solution here. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
where did that light bulb go off?
Well, so after doing that course in sound therapy, I um what happened next? I wanted to study psychology. I had kind of always had an interest in it, and so I did a master's in psychology. And because a lot of the people that I had encountered that offered sound therapy were psychologists or speech and language therapists. So I thought, okay, well, become a psychologist. But then when I studied psychology, I realized a lot of it had to do with, like, I wasn't actually that interested in most of it, like, uh, it's a lot about what happens when things go wrong with the mind and that kind of thing. So I wasn't that interested. And to be a psychologist, you have to do a PhD, which I wasn't opposed to doing, but it needs to be in something that I really want to do for the next 3 to 5 years. So after psychology, I thought, okay, what do I want to do? And the 3 months before I graduated from the psychology master's, I I don't I guess it just popped into my head, the word audiology, which I had never heard before. Because in so I born and raised in France, Switzerland area, and audiology is not a profession over here. So I didn't know what the word came and I thought, what's audiology? If you go to the ENT over here, you the doctor will either do the testing or they'll just have someone in the room that does their testing for them, but there isn't an audiologist the way it exists in the UK or the US or Australia. So I googled, what does an audiologist do? What is audiology? And uh it so happened that it was I think it was the 20th of April that I googled this, and the University of Southampton had the closing date for their masters was the 21st of April. So I just put in my application the day that I found out about what audiology was. And
Okay,
and
sorry, hang on a minute.
yeah,
You literally had like this lightning strike idea. You went to
yes.
Google, were like, what's this? And then
Yeah.
up pops this. So what was it? A PhD?
Oh, this was another master's.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it okay. So do you collect masters like their Pokemon cards?
That actually is what I feel like.
Because I'm like, how many are we on now? Three or four?
We're on three.
Yeah, okay, good. Just checking. Yeah, just because one is not enough. So, okay, so you just, yeah, ding, there's the light bulb. Oh, what's that word? I think I'll look at that. Oh, hang on, Southampton. Awesome. Oh, tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, and I never actually told the story like that until today. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that really did happen that way. Just
You
the
were motivated.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, great. Obviously, obviously it all arrived at the time, but they say, don't they, that, you manifest and things will arrive at the time that you need them. And it was literally at the time that you needed it.
I bang on at the time that I needed it. Yeah. So yeah, then I went to study audiology, and it was really interesting because really what I wanted was the basis in understanding the ear and what was going on. Actually, I should mention that part of this journey was also one that's personal for me because, and it's still kind of ongoing, probably about the time that I started my psychology master's. No, the time that I did that reflexes course, I noticed that there was a slight change in my hearing on the right, but not a little bit like, when you're on the plane and your ear is just a little bit blocked. So it's not like you can't hear. It's just that I can tell the difference between the two ears. And um what I noticed with that, because it's a long-term thing, it wasn't, there wasn't any blockage or whatever. What I noticed with that was that, and this is going to sound like really weird, my spelling was affected. So and I know it's weird, but
For anyone
I
listening, I just did, ooh, shocked face.
yeah, I really like I love words and spelling and grammar and all of those things. And I noticed after a while, so maybe 6 months, and I still have it, um, that I would make spelling mistakes that when I looked back, I'd be like, really, Priscilla? Like I would look back and think, these are just not mistakes I ever used to make. Or um if you're saying like is there, and is it THERE or is it THEY apostrophe for RE,
Mm.
those kinds of things where I would hesitate and be like, which one is it? And so I genuinely, that was also something that got me thinking about the auditory system and the fact that it's playing a different role than most people attribute to it. So yeah, that was also a contributing factor in me saying, I want to understand more about the ear. Yeah.
I mean, that's just utterly fascinating, really, isn't it? Like the route that you kind of went to it, but also noticing that in yourself at the same time, as if it's
Mm,
almost as if, these things were just presenting themselves to you at the time that you were ready to kind of really tune in and go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, and I've
right.
noticed something in myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, that's fascinating. So, okay, so you're collecting master's degrees like they're going out of fashion. Now you're an auditory expert. What what came next? What did you just so you've got all of these things now, and you're like, what do I do with them?
Yeah. So what did I do with them? So it's interesting because when I said I think generally my career path is one, I'm not even sure I would call it a path. I think I'd call it a field. That's,
Yeah,
uh,
you're strolling through the field, aren't you? Of yeah, absolutely,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Because at that point, um, whilst I was doing my master's, the master's in audiology. So this was during one of the lockdowns in
Right.
COVID.
There were many.
And so it was when the Delta hit the UK, and I came back to Geneva, and then I couldn't go back. And during that time, in parallel, I decided, you know, I've been curious about this is left field.
There it
Uh,
is.
curious about modeling. I should, I should apply to some agencies and see what happens. So that's what I did then, and I just applied to a bunch of agencies, and then yeah, there was this agency in the UK that said, "Yeah, sure, we'd like to represent you." So I thought, "Cool, well, I'll."
And I'm just going to interrupt as well, because for anyone who's not watching on YouTube who is listening, so not only do you have a voice like velvet and melted butter, which I'm incredibly envious of, but yeah, I'm not surprised that you could walk into any modeling agency and they're just like, "Yep, sign you up."
Well,
So,
that's
so,
very kind, Katie.
so she's won the jackpot, my lovelies.
Uh,
So just for anyone listening, you are yeah, it'll all make sense if you have a little look on the YouTube channel.
that's very kind. But yeah, so I decided, oh. Something's going on outside. I decided to do a little bit of that and kind of just do some audiology and then do some modeling as well. And in the interim, then I, during lockdown, spent some time in Ghana to do some of that and came back to finish the audiology assessment and everything when we were allowed to come back into the country and all of that. And so after that master's, uh, spent some time in Geneva and South Africa, and then I came back to the UK to work with a modeling agency and to do some audiology. And uh, then there was a link to what I wanted to what I wanted to say about I think this is why I said like the field the field,
Yeah. You got
but
curious and you went off on a right. So yeah, where had we got to? So do you know what?
um,
I'm no use to you either because I've got a menopause brain. I've been writing things down frantically as you're going because I'm like, if I don't write that down, I've got no hope remembering it. So we were making a link, weren't we? We'd done the
oh,
auditory.
I remember.
Got it. Go.
Remember. Yes. So I started working in audiology after I came back from South Africa. And so I was kind of doing both and doing kind of the general work of an audiologist, which, as I said, mostly has to do with hearing loss. So often that has to do with hearing aids. So you test the hearing aids, that kind of thing. And um, yeah, was just really interested in the top end, and a lot of what I realized as I did the degree was that no one had even really heard of sound therapy. They were just, well, yeah, I'm here because I'm going to be fitting hearing aids or cochlear implants or that kind of thing. And I was just very intrigued that the fact that, well, ear specialists aren't talking about the auditory system and cognition and how your ears are related to your emotions and all of these kinds of things.
Mm.
So although I got the training in audiology, I didn't actually I didn't actually delve deeper into the stuff that I had learned on the sound therapy courses. So yeah, all that to say, that was kind of the gap in the audiology, psychology, and the
Yeah.
mixing of that.
where
And
those two things kind of overlap. Because it was
exactly.
interesting because to rewind a bit as well, you said before about when we talk about the auditory system that the ear does more than we kind of expect or than we kind of think about.
Yeah.
So, and is that kind of what you're referring to in the sense that actually, because I obviously had no idea as well about its connection to emotions either. So,
Mm,
in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, it's hearing and sound, and then there's balance because it's got that going on for us as well.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's kind of where my knowledge ends.
Yeah.
So, through your work doing the kind of the sound therapy, actually it's deeper than that. So where did that then kind of overlap exploration take you?
Mm. Um, well, I would say it's still taking me, but the yeah, that idea of what the ears do, which is more than hearing. Um, yeah, to be honest, it still kind of surprises me that it's not more talked about, or at least even that people aren't curious about it. I guess even in looking at how the auditory system is when you look at it as a structure. um I am wanting to explain something. And so essentially your hearing organ is a little bit like a xylophone, right? You have low tones, high tones, but it's ordered in that way. So every sound that you hear is it will kind of start this wave, and it will have the highest amplitude of the wave according to the sound that you're hearing somewhere along that xylophone, if that makes sense. And from the hearing organ, that is then just sent to the brain. But what's interesting is that when it's sent to the brain, that order is preserved, right? So it's as if you have like a xylophone represented in your brain, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And um, so it then also it then actually makes sense that, well, if everything we hear is some tone of some sort, and we know that we learn things through what we hear. So we learn to speak through what we hear. We learn languages through what we hear. We learn um, the things that we then use to read and write through what we hear. All of those things come through what we hear. Um, and that the system is so well ordered, then it then means that if we can be intentional about how these sounds are reaching the brain, or we can re-educate that path, or how we hear, or how we listen. Um, so that's kind of the rabbit trail that it's brought me down, and it reminds me of um, this one guy he's called Michael Mersnick, and the he's one of the people who was involved in one of the first cochlear implants in
Okay.
the world. So I think probably in the 70s. Don't quote me on that, but quite a while ago. And uh I guess for anyone who's not familiar with what a cochlear implant does, it's a so your hearing organ is cased inside your cochlea. So it's like a little snail that's what your hearing organ is in. And the to give you perspective, we have 15,000 cells in that little ear that send signals to the brain. And a cochlear implant um, mimics those cells when people have hearing loss and those cells aren't functioning. And so this guy, Michael Mersnick, the cochlear implant that they used on someone who had profound hearing loss, they had one electrode on it, and an electrode is essentially supposed to mimic one of those cells, right? So perspective, we have 15,000 per ear, and the thing they were putting it had one,
One.
right? So by their own admission, it was it wasn't going to work very well, you know?
They managed their expectations.
Exactly. And so what they were after was that this person with profound hearing loss would perhaps be able to perceive a very loud sound that they weren't able to perceive before. That was their expectation, and that was it. And when they switched on this cochlear implant, that was the case. That person could hear pretty much just that. And they thought, well, it was not the greatest of prototypes, but it did something.
But it
And what
proved the
they just
theory, right? Like it proved the theory, the thing that they were trying to achieve was if we do this, it could
Yeah,
achieve something. And then they did that and it proved that their thought process
yes,
was
exactly.
correct, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But what they didn't expect was fast forward, I don't know, I don't even think it was that long a time, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. And this person started understanding speech. And they were like, that one we didn't expect, because we know how bad this thing was. It's just one electrode. And so uh what that showed them, so now Michael Mersnick is termed the father of plasticity, brain plasticity. What it showed them was that the auditory system was very plastic, and it learned something in a quite a short space of time. So and it's just an amazing discovery. And such that it tells you there's so much more going on than just hearing. The
Yeah.
understanding and all the interconnectedness with everything that's involved with understanding speech was, yeah, was huge. So these are some of the things that I'm like, I don't think we explore this enough, you know? Yeah.
And for me, I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, it is really fascinating, isn't it, when you think about that? And it's kind of blown my mind a little bit because my niece has a cochlear implant, and I've
Mm.
never like never really thought about like I thought about it, but I've never really stopped and gone, oh shit, yeah, like actually.
Mm.
And the whole that what you said about the neuroplasticity piece, it's like, actually, of course, because like we our brains are just so smart, aren't they? Like they are designed perfectly to do the things that we need them to do. And to think that they're not like a Mr. Potato Head plug and play thing, are they? Like they like, again, going through menopause, I know that my brain is literally rewiring itself.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
like, because it's smart, it's a really
Yeah.
clever organ. And it is the organ that interprets everything else that's going on. Like,
Mm.
things
Mhm.
aren't real, it's our brain that decides and decodes, which I find fascinating. And I
Mm.
was wondering then, with what you and I'm hoping you can answer this question,
Mm.
because from what I understand, when with vision, like our brain will fill in blanks if we're not sure about things, or it'll make stuff up for us, to
Mm.
kind of make, fill in the gaps and things that we think about. So does the
Mm.
same happen with our hearing? Because when you said if we've got that xylophone and the notes aren't necessarily, or tones rather, aren't necessarily kind of scrambled up and decoded, but it transmits them exactly as they are. So does our brain also do an element of like filling in the gaps of things that we think we might hear? And it's like, it might be that, it's probably that. We'll tell you it's that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that in that they're different parts that do different things. Um, like when you're, I don't know, in a noisy place and you're listening to someone and there's so many competing sounds and your brain, it's like, when you it's that thing that you do when you're like, "Oh, now tune into the music that's playing," and it's like you can do that, and you're like, "How am I doing that? I don't know, but I'm just paying attention to it," you know?
Hmm.
And you're you have this ability to nearly tune your mind to what you're expecting to hear, and then you're kinda able to hear that. And some of that is gonna be what you're expecting, and some of that is gonna be and you might be right or wrong,
Yeah.
and some of that is, your ability to actually shift in focus um, and and tune your mind to
Mm.
something over something else. And then there's also part of your brain that has to do with, um not just the words that you are hearing, but the way that is spoken. So, did that person just tell me a joke, or did that person mean that seriously?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah, your
Yeah.
brain is eh, taking in all that information, you know?
Yeah. And that's something, as you were saying, that came up for me as well. I was thinking, oh, there's the hearing side of things, but then there's also the interpretation of the hearing, which then
100%.
that's the next step, isn't it? There's the
Yeah.
how do we hear, and then there's what do we think that means?
Yeah.
Like, is it
And
a baby crying or is it a cat? Don't know. Depends on
yeah,
what.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess also to do with that, and I think, well, at least when I think about it, I think, well, it makes sense when we think of the auditory system and, let's say, emotion. I don't know if you've ever had an experience with a certain word. Like, I think often negative experience tend to stay in the mind as like, oh, I remember when I was called this or whatever. And then the next time you hear it, you might have a visceral reaction to that word, and it just shows the link between those two, like it was just something you heard, but it's something that you heard, and it went not just through your ears, but through your emotional brain and, all of
Mm.
these things. So yeah, there's so much in there.
And oh God, it's so interesting. So and is this kind of connection then? Because I'm in my mind, I'm going back to the kind of the neurodiversity piece as well around the connection between that and emotions and hearing.
Mm,
I'm wondering if there is um are some people through sound in that, like in the way that you just described, are maybe more connected
mm,
to their emotions and therefore more likely to be, for want of a better word, triggered by sounds or
mm,
words or things than
yeah.
perhaps other people? Like, is there a
Oh yeah,
yeah.
100%. I that's the case for sure. Like, I mean, and it is a condition, misophonia, where certain sounds just cause anger, you
Yeah.
know? And I- it reminds me of this one student that I worked with who, well, had been diagnosed with ADHD, and I remember testing his hearing and looking at the hearing curve and seeing that in some tones, this was actually in high pitched tones, this person could hear far better than he could in the low frequency tones, right? Or the low pitch tones. And as I looked at it, I just thought it makes so much sense that you would find it difficult focusing if you're hearing stuff that most people can't hear,
Um,
and that if you just think about what you can hear for yourself, if certain tones are far more accentuated than others, then I mean, yeah, good job concentrating. Just
yeah,
good job.
yeah.
I mean, or it's
Actually,
like good luck concentrating more rather. Yeah.
yeah, and that makes sense, doesn't it? Because I can imagine everybody listening can imagine, if you've ever tried to work in a busy cafe,
Mm.
like there'll be some times that maybe you can just tune out and you don't hear it all, but there'll be other times that every clink of a cup or the tinkle of a
Exactly.
teaspoon or that person sitting near you talking that you just can't, their voice just permeates through every ounce of your concentration. And I
Yeah.
can imagine like that's what you're explaining. It sounds like for some people that just exists a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's something that you a lot of times you see in, some kids on the spectrum, like, they will literally block their ears because the sound is just too overwhelming, and
Yeah.
it's such a yeah, it's one of those things that you're just constantly stimulating your brain with something, and
Mm.
yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah.
that was the word overstimulation that came to my mind. So I'm thinking then actually then I guess now if we bring in all of your leadership expertise as well and we overlay that into a leadership perspective,
Mm,
understanding that as a leader is also super helpful, right? Because if we all work in big open plan offices, if I've
right,
got someone on my team who that environment is not going to be conducive to them being able to concentrate and get on with their work, back to
yeah,
your earlier example, if I'm just saying to them, just sit down for the next 20 minutes, just focus on nothing but doing this thing. And yet there they
mm,
are with all of that stimulus.
yeah,
Like you say, good luck.
yeah, and I think the one of the things that I learned a lot in like the different courses on whether reflexes or sound therapy is for the a lot of people who might have difficulty with X, Y, or Z, often what happens is we're just really good at compensating. So we might find we struggle in a certain area, could be to focus, could be to concentrate, whatever, and we're able to do it, but it actually just takes a lot out of us to do it. And those kids, they might be well within the bell curve. So it's not like it's no alarm bells are going off anywhere academically, but does it tire you out? Does
Mm,
it? Absolutely. And all of these people are then working somewhere.
yeah.
And, they might be your CEO. They might be, it's your CEO that's burnt out, or whatever.
Mm,
And they're just I'm convinced that there are thousands, millions of people that have learned how to compensate really well for the things that could just be tweaked a little, helped, and, yeah, that it would just feel like, "Oh, okay, I don't have to work so hard at doing this
Yeah.
thing that I'm expected to do." So, yeah, I think there are so many things that can be tweaked to help people. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's energy, isn't it, that's being used up in one place when really it could be better or more productively spent for that individual, for their business, for their family, for whatever,
Yeah.
in a way that actually is better for them rather than, like you say, just trying to operate in a
Yeah.
world or an environment that is making life harder for them.
Mm.
If you had to give a few top tips then to people as to things that they could pay attention to that might help them either notice when someone is maybe having to is kind of overcompensate the right word? Is that like to, have to put more of the energy in, or even in
Mhm.
themselves?
Mm.
Oh, and maybe some tips for things that they could try to readdress that balance. What things would you say that people should look out for?
Um, yeah, so there are 3 categories, and I'm still working on my categories of, how the ear helps with everything in life, but, I boiled
It's
it
okay.
down.
We'll do a take two and a take three. You can come back many times as this evolves because I think this is fascinating.
Well, I'm down to 3, which is cognition, communication, and inner calm, which is like, well-being.
Mm.
And on the cognition side of things, um, definitely I would say just attention and focus, the how well we're able to attend to things and an order of, if someone tells you, "Hey, can you do this for me?" Are you often stuck at number 1, and then you're like, "I can't remember what the other 2, 3, or 4 were." Um, One thing which could also you could also look at is when it comes to reading, if it's something, again, a lot of people find that they compensate well in reading strategies, but you might find it's always kind of just been a bit of a struggle, that whole thing. I struggle to give a I should have actually been like, here are the top tips that I'm gonna give you for it. Because obviously there's sound therapy where you really would go, and what sound therapy involves is actually measuring where your thresholds are for several pitches, and are there areas where you're hypersensitive, areas where you're hyposensitive, and then it kind of involves telling the brain like, you don't have to pay so much attention to these ones, but what about these ones? Don't we like these ones? So um but I'm trying to think of.
So might it be a thing that if this everything you've been saying thus far is really resonating with someone and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of this. You know, I really need to know more about this. You
Mm,
kind of saying actually get online and explore some sound therapy. If somebody wants to do like a deep dive to like,
yeah.
oh, resonate with this.
Yeah, I would say that would be good. There's sound therapy. There's also that Michael Mersnick guy that I mentioned. What I do is, so he developed this thing called Brain HQ, and I use Brain HQ. Um, so if someone just has more of the cognition side, so wants to improve their auditory processing speed or their ability to remember stuff, but this is more of an active thing, so it's training the brain through exercises. That's also something. So the way I would do it is, well, the sound therapy helps, how your brain is firing in the first place, or how your auditory system is sending signals to your brain. And then the brain HQ is then you saying, okay, now my brain can get better and better and better. And yeah, so that's the cognition side of things. Communication side, um, when it comes to public speaking, is I said, and you've heard my my little spiel on how the ears can make you a better speaker.
I have.
Uh,
It's very good. Well, actually, just for anyone listening, that's how Priscilla and I met. So
yes,
we entered the same speaking competition where Priscilla was outstanding, I must
as was
say.
Katie.
Well, I mean, you got on that final stage and it was amazing. So yes, so sorry, but yes, I have seen you I speak professionally, and it is good. It is worth booking, Priscilla.
Thanks. Yeah, and so what I say in that talk is that you speak how you hear. Really, uh, everything about your voice comes from your ability to hear your voice and then regulate it. And so when it comes to public speaking, there are a lot of things that your ears really help you with. And uh, there's something even before you get up to speak when you're writing your speech. I don't know. There, everybody has a different process for writing speeches or talks, but I often write down stuff that I want to say. And when I'm struggling or I find like, is this making sense? Auditory assistance, which is basically reading it out loud, is what really helps you to come up with more ideas, for the ideas to flow, for you to say like, this doesn't make sense, or it does. Um, Definitely something to do. But when you're actually about to speak and your nerves are running wild, um, what I I I I haven't given it a name or a method, but when you block your ear, using your index to block your ear, you that occlusion makes you hear your voice far more loudly than anything else, because your bones are basically resonating, and that's what you're hearing. And so doing that and singing to yourself is a really good method to reduce nerves, because of the fact that your a very important nerve in your body, which is the vagus nerve, that helps you to rest and digest after there's something that caused you to go into fight or flight mode. The place that it is accessed from outside the body is on the eardrum and the ear canal. So uh yeah, I think it's intuitive that, when you're singing, you're usually not stressed, and when you're stressed, you're usually not singing. So singing really does help to de-stress before you speak. And yeah, just rehearsing your own voice and listening to it in such a way that you can tell, like, is this monotonous? Is it something that other people would want to listen to? Yeah. So yeah.
So just on the stress thing, to throw one of your own bits back at you. So we're going to do the Mariah Carey, like one finger in our ear, sing to ourselves
Yeah.
to bring our stress levels down, because our brain will say, oh, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
we couldn't possibly be giving All I Want for Christmas a rendition if we were upset about something.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Other
Yeah.
Mariah Carey songs are available.
Yes, others. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's something that I've started doing. I'm like, yeah, actually it helps to sing to myself before I speak to people. I Yeah. It's been working.
So what we'll get to inner calm in a minute, because I know that was your third piece. So in the
Yeah.
cognition thing, if people are paying attention to their attention and their focus,
Yeah.
and they're thinking, actually, that is something I struggle with,
Mm.
then exploring sound and hearing could be something, and they can reach out to you to talk then about Brain HQ. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
Brain
If they want
HQ
to
or
learn more
sleep
about that
therapy.
specifically. So
Yeah.
that could be, so that's kind of something to pay attention to, and then an action they can take if that's of interest to them and they think, yeah, that resonates.
Yeah.
And then if actually getting a little bit nervous, especially if we're going to do public speaking or anything else like that, if we're finding our nerves hetting up, we can break out the Mariah Carey by calming our vagus nerve.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's something to
Yeah.
pay attention to and then something to kind of use to combat that. So what
Mm.
about the inner calm then? Where does that come into it?
Yeah, the inner calm. The inner calm is, well, it's obviously obvious. It's also related to the vagus nerve because that definitely helps to calm. And the inner calm part is one that fascinates me the most, and one that I'm still understanding, and I think it's not, it doesn't look like it's um, very well understood. But the inner calm is essentially just how your hearing affects your emotions. And intuitively, we know you can listen to a song and feel like you want to crawl into a hole, or like you can take on the world. You know? So
True.
there's it's an obvious thing that what we hear affects how we feel. But there's a one of the fathers of sound therapy was called Berard, Berard, for anyone who wants to look it up. And he writes in his book, which is called Hearing Equals Behavior, that there were two, well, there was a girl who was struggling academically, and she came, yeah.
Sorry, no, no, carry on. I think, is this the dancing thing? No, carry on. Sorry, I got all excited. You carry on.
No, but I'm interested.
We'll
Did
trade
I?
stories in a minute. You go.
Okay. So there, yeah, so this girl, she struggled academically, and the school psychologist sent her to go and see Berard to get some sound therapy. And she lived out of town, so she specifically asked if this girl could stay with a nurturing family because this girl struggled with suicidal ideation. And so this doctor found someone. She came to do the sound therapy, and she went back to her country, and her progress and her improvement were so apparent that the school psychologist sent another person who was in that school to this guy. And she said, can this second girl stay with the same family, because the first girl's doing much better. So she did. She did this therapy, went back to the country. She also did a lot better. Happy days. And some months later, a man came from the south of France, I believe it was, and he was struggling with tinnitus, so ringing in the ears. And it was so bad that this guy said to him, you need to get rid of this or I'm going to kill myself because it's so bad. And which is not actually, it's not uncommon for people to have depressive symptoms because you just never have peace and quiet.
Mm.
And so this doctor says, well, I'll do what I can, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. So he does this therapy, and at the end of it, it's improved greatly. And so, well, this guy doesn't want to kill himself anymore. So great. And after some time, this doctor just thinks, well, the two girls who came, they did the therapy, they got better, and he always attributed them not struggling with suicide anymore to the family that they were staying with. But and it was clear why this guy came with the tinnitus and what effect that had. But he decided to compare their hearing curves, these two girls and this one guy. And he said when he looked at the hearing curves, he was like, it was three identical curves. And when they had done the therapy, well, the curves were slightly different. And so had the suicidal ideation gone, right? And so what he decided was um, whenever he would observe a certain pattern. So a hearing curve is such that you have your pitches from left to right, and you have the threshold from low to high, and you plot them on a graph. And so what he observed was that at a certain pitch, there was a hypersensitivity, and at another pitch, at a certain pitch, there was a hyposensitivity. And it was just followed a certain pattern. So whenever he saw this pattern, he would ask his patient, have you ever struggled with suicidal ideation? And he writes in his book, 95% of his patients were like, how do you know this about me? You know?
Yeah,
And
wow.
so this fascinates me. And I'm that inner calm piece of just how your ears are communicating with your emotional brain, and um yeah, just the number of things that and I do want to caveat for anyone listening that I am not saying that the ears are the cure all to everything. But I am very interested in a non-invasive way that is not going to drug people up, and is not going to you're not going to be worse off for having just tried to retrain your auditory system, and the way it's sending signals to your brain. So that's the inner calm piece. So obviously this had to do with specifically with suicide, but there are, yeah, it could just be a feeling of just being down. It could be um it's far reaching. It's far reaching.
Yeah. That is fascinating, isn't it?
Mm,
Really, when you think, and I mean, just exactly to reiterate what you've just said, that it may not be the solution to everything, but actually,
mm,
if there is a percentage of the population whose mood and feelings can be improved
mm.
by sound therapy, like you said, it's not medication, it's just helping your brain retrain.
Yeah.
Why would we not give that a go?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So,
And almost it feels as if it's one of those things that even, if you are suffering in that regard, to participate in something nine
mm,
times out of 10 can make people feel better, even if it doesn't have the long-term effects, isn't it? It's some,
yeah,
that
yeah,
we talk, that's why we
absolutely.
say talk therapy doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily cure
yeah.
people, but the act of just speaking can help you feel better. And I wonder if there's also a link to the act of sharing our feelings and saying them out loud to someone else is also linked to the way that we hear ourselves say them out loud, as well as being heard.
I would believe that. I would believe
Yeah.
that,
I
yeah.
mean, it kind of make it now, now it all makes sense because people often say, don't they, oh, you can go outside and talk to a lamppost and you'll probably feel better. It doesn't necessarily have to be at someone. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, is it the words we say, or is it the sound of the words that we
Mm.
say?
Yeah, I definitely think it's both.
Mm.
And sometimes the fact that, oh, sorry, someone's calling me. And sometimes the fact that someone is listening means that we say things to ourselves, or we hear ourselves say things that we never would have had no one listen. Because
Yeah.
let's be honest, we love to talk and we love to interrupt each other and that kind of thing. But just having someone who's there to listen is massive, massive.
Yeah. So then on the inner calm piece, so firstly, we should all go Berard, was it Berard?
Yeah,
Berard.
absolutely. Mhm.
So we all need to go and check that out because that sounds flipping interesting.
Yeah.
So
So
then for
that is the
paying,
sound therapy that I've been referring to. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that is flipping interesting. So we need to go and have a little bit of look at that. Do some work about thinking about actually how can we experiment with sound and how that changes our mood.
Mm,
And exactly, look, as when you started saying that, I think if I'm in the gym and there's a really like low tempo song on,
mm.
those weights feel so heavy, like, don't they? But then if you get a proper banger,
Yeah.
I can
Could
up it
do
goes,
anything.
right? It's interesting, isn't it? But it's exactly that. It really does. Like, if you get a good tune in the morning when you get up, you can think, yeah, today's a good
Yeah.
day. It can really make a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the memories and things. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, We could go off on this all day, couldn't we? So,
Wait,
but
but I want to hear the dancing story.
oh no, do you know what? It's not that interesting at all. As I went, oh, because it and I did it silently in the hope that I wouldn't interrupt you, and then it did. So sorry. But it reminded me, and I realized as I went, oh, of course it's not going to be connected, because I was thinking about the Ken Robinson story that he tells in his TED talk, about
Oh,
the
yeah.
person who does like
Ballet.
ballet and a dancer, and she's like, she's yeah, she has ADHD, she's a dancer as well, like that
Mm.
story. So I was like,
Oh,
oh yeah,
yeah, I loved that story. And my
yeah,
favorite TED Talk of all time. Yeah.
the most watched TED talk of all time, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
I'm
seems to be
very
everyone's
not
favorite.
special. Everybody loved
Yeah.
the TED Talk.
We're all a fan. Yeah, we've all got it as a reference point, haven't we? But yeah, yes, but then this is that actually for me, what you've just shared is even more fascinating, because I'm like, like that's so cool. It's
Mm,
so cool that our actual moods can, it's really made me just want to go and get my hearing tested so I can like figure out like, well, where does it sit, and what correlations are out there that someone can give
mm,
me insight into me and who I am
mm.
just through that.
Yeah, so that is what I want to just I'm so convinced. So here's the the principle, and I this is me just as an audiologist saying how I think it works rather than, for anyone who's a scientist out there, like don't
Take
burn
it, take
at
it
the
in the way that it
stake,
is intended.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just hypothesizing. But the um are you familiar with the idea of resonance?
I think so. I think I understand what the word resonance mean, but for me, it's like a feeling.
Oh, well, so it's I guess that, yeah, like when something resonates with you.
Yeah, but like a, oh God, I'm flapping my hands and I can't like vibrations, I think is the word like
Yes.
I'm thinking of.
Yes. No, but exactly. Well, the it comes from the fact that everything resonates. So everything is made from like atoms, molecules, particles, and everything is vibrating, right? And everything has a resonance. And that resonance, when you're in the bathroom and you hit a certain note and it's suddenly so much louder than all the other notes. I don't know if that's ever happened. Has that ever
I mean, sometimes I sound incredible when I sing in the shower, and then if I sing anywhere
happened?
else where anyone else can hear, it's terrible. So it's probably that.
Yeah. Well, but essentially what happens is that you you hit the resonance of that room, and there's a certain note that is so much louder than all the other notes, and that's because you found the resonance of that room. And it's the pitch at which yeah, everything is going to vibrate far more than it would. And that's why when, you see in movies someone hit a certain note and a glass broke, it resonated. It was the pitch
Right.
of the voice and the glass were at the same, and it was too much for the glass and the glass broke. That's what's happening. But my point is that if that's the case for everything, everything has a resonant frequency. What I'm conjecturing is that what's happening is that um, given that there's a spectrum of sounds that we hear, um, there are different things in our body that will resonate at certain pitches, and that if through this therapy we're kind of causing those different points or different, it could be parts of our body, it could be whatever, to resonate. I believe there's so much in there. I think I'm just scratching the surface, but I think that that's probably something that's happening because everything has a resonant frequency. And I don't think I think we're very much into um the the medically, we pay attention to chemical reality, we pay attention to biological reality, physical, mechanical. but vibrational, not so much, right? So that's the part that I think has so much in it. And unfortunately, when it comes to that, it starts, I think a lot of quote unquote real scientists are like, okay, here we go. You're gonna say everything's a vibration. But I'm like, but everything is a vibration.
I was
And
going to say, given your original description of resonance,
uh,
like, that makes sense because we know that we're made up of like atoms, and we know that like when molecules vibrate, that's how heat and energy gets like
yeah,
we know that's true.
yeah.
So that's science.
Yeah, yeah. And I just don't think we know enough about it when it comes to, well, then how does one heal and through these vibrations and whatever. And I'm not even purporting to say that like I know exactly how these things are related, but I imagine that since our ears capture vibrations, like I think that's probably related to how it works. So yeah.
I'm going to do a very quick, massive overshare, but I don't want to go into details about it. But something you're saying has
Ooh.
totally blown my mind.
Uh-huh.
And I'll keep it short because I am conscious. Otherwise, this is going to be like a part 3, 4 episode. I can tell because we're going to have to come back to this. So I don't know if you're aware, but I'm an asexual person, which means that I don't
Um,
experience sexual attraction in the
uh-huh.
same way that other people do. But
Okay.
for me, words, hearing, sound
Mm.
has a certain effect on my body. So whereas I
Mm.
don't experience directional attraction,
Mm.
um, oh, what's the word? Like basically stimulus happens for me through sound. And
Mm.
everything you've just said was like blocks slotting into place as to
Wow.
why that might be. And I
Huh.
think that's absolutely fascinating.
That is super. I mean, that's that is super fascinating. And
Yeah.
the things that I guess it's related to what we were saying before and the things how we that we hear and what is associated with those sounds. Like how do those affect our physical bodies, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So I'm gonna put a pin in that one and come back to it.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
No, no, but and also there because I'm just like, oh, now I've got many questions, so I think I am gonna park that, and I'm gonna have to follow up with you about that another time. We're like, want to go down that rabbit hole. Um, awesome. So I'm really conscious that
Yeah.
we've had such an amazing conversation, but time is a ticking. So, Priscilla Leigh, is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to share or to say that you would like to?
Oh, well, I realized actually that I didn't even talk about the outer ear. So, um, the outer ear, and I'm not gonna lie, when I discovered sound therapy, I was like, the outer ear is when I refer to the outer ear, I'm speaking about the part of the ear that you can see.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the thing that's like
Like,
funny.
give it a little tug for anyone. This bit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, I was like, what exactly does the outer ear do? Not very much. It like funnels the sound in, and then the rest of the ear does all the work. But then I discovered auricular therapy, which is essentially, you can get acupuncture kind of anywhere on your body, but your ear has your whole body represented on it. So all of your inner organs, all of that, it's all represented on your outer ear. So if you stimulate little parts of your outer ear, you can also cause healing in the other parts of your body. So that was a part that I was like, I shouldn't forget to say that because it's an amazing part.
That's genius. So actually, if we just spend a bit of time and I know full well that everybody listening to this right now, we're immediately going to be rubbing and touching our ears, aren't we? We're going
Yeah.
to be
What do I
poking,
do for
like,
a
do
headache?
I
Yeah.
feel better? But actually, and that tracks because Mel Sherwood, who is also another speaker within the Professional Speakers Association, she talks about like when you get nervous ahead of speaking to like rub your earlobes and pull on your earlobes. So I
Mm,
guess that would make sense as to actually why that would work
yeah.
because it's connected to something in you that could be calming.
Yeah.
So like
100.
reflexology for your ears.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But anything that I wanted to say that um no, I guess just that, yeah, so now what I do is combine my love for ears with leadership.
Naturally.
Yeah, no leap at all whatsoever there. But actually, but I think going back to what I know about people compensating and the fact that most people have their ears aren't even on their radar in any way.
Mm,
Um, I genuinely think that a lot of the things that we do to manage stress and anxiety, because that's a big thing, um, and just a lot of things that are involved in leadership, um, we can very much be helped by a better understanding of the auditory system, re-educating the auditory system, and yeah, and that combination of just the cognition that's needed for leadership, the communication, and the inner calm, I think are vital. So, yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine how fascinated everybody is that has been listening to this, and I'm sure there'll be more conversations that people are going to want to have with you, to bring you into their workplaces to have these types of conversations, because I think, gosh, it's so interesting and fascinating and important,
Mm,
really, isn't it? It's such an untapped area of potential,
for sure. Yeah.
massively. So, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to connect with you?
People can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, Priscilla Leigh. I recently started calling myself the ear evangelist because
The ear evangelist.
yeah, ear evangelist. Because ears are awesome. And so LinkedIn, Priscilla Leigh, and to be honest, that's the main one. My
Yeah,
email is info@priscillalee.com. So drop me an email if yeah, if you're interested in
mm,
leadership coaching, public speaking coaching, and how the ears will help you become a better communicator and leader. Yeah,
perfect. So LinkedIn at Priscilla Leigh or info@priscillalee.com if people want to contact you. Priscilla Leigh, I shall say it again just so that people know, and that's Leigh, Leigh, for anybody that needs to be sure of the spelling. So it has been a fabulous to have you along. I've loved this conversation, and I do hope that we get to do a part two, because I think we could probably just turn over the page. Couldn't we have another hour-long conversation with
for
you
sure.
at all?
For sure. Well,
So
thank you for
thank you so much.
hosting and hosting so brilliantly. And it's been a real pleasure to be on the show.
No, because the more I hear you talk about this, the more I just think this needs huge amounts of funding and huge amounts of research. And like, why are we not all talking about this?
Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
fascinating. I mean, you might be slightly biased, but I'm fresh and I'm like, this, give Priscilla all of the money so that she can tell us how we can just hack some new parts of our brain, because this is, oh, it's so bloody interesting.
I love it. I just love it. Yeah. And I think um oh well actually that's probably something I should have said on the podcast.
Say it now.
But
Say it now, I'll drop it in.
oh yeah, that really I think when it comes down to it and what's the why, which is it's the same why now as it was with the kids. It's really about giving people hope when they weren't looking for it, you know? They were like, "Well, where can I find hope here?" And when people are like, "Oh, yeah, I've struggled with reading or I never was able to focus," and you can say like, "This might be a solution." I'm not saying but it might be a solution to someone who just thought, "Oh, this is just how my body works, or this is just something that I have to deal with." And, yeah, that's what it's
And
about.
it's almost like it can just be one step on a pathway of people helping to just learn something new about themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And why would we not want that?